wonderful example of a bit that I think should all listen to what your experience was. So this is a roundtable with Casper, who's the director of Sharing Perspectives Foundation, with Marta Giralt, who is lecturer in Spanish at the University of Limerick, with Luca Versichelli, who is professor of political science here in Siena, and with Sara Pittarello, who is the outreach officer at UniCollaboration. And I'm here as a trainer within UniCollaboration, although I work for the University of Bologna. So I have prepared perhaps a question each, but the idea is that you answer the question, and then any of the others on the table, please feel free to contribute. But also, if any of you have questions to add or comments to add to what has been said, then feel free to take the microphone, and let's turn this into a conversation, including you, like we did with following Francesca's presentation. And I'm going to start with Marta, perhaps. I mean, we've seen the different outputs of the Frames project, and the first output was the scenarios. How do you think that scenarios can help in the integration of virtual exchange in higher education?
So it gives a good of the different possibilities that virtual exchange can have when we integrate them in higher education. There is the 4 scenarios that Christina mentioned. So I think as a frame, and I'm sorry for no frames, but it gives really this good idea, and especially for those staff maybe that are not that familiar, because sometimes when we talk about virtual exchange and online exchange, so it could be a bit misleading or confusing. So it gives clear examples of the 4 different type of exchanges. And the report of all the 5 scenarios give also a lot of detail on the different contexts, that's different countries, that's the examples that they're based on. Also, the different disciplines maybe that can be applied, because it's across, but tries to be across all the different disciplines, gives highlights, challenges, and also benefits. So it's a good start from that point of view when we are thinking about, okay, how do I integrate virtual exchange, but not just for academics, also for other university staff that are thinking of how that can be implemented and integrated. So that's a good start when thinking about integrating. So,
anybody else wants to add anything to this?
To add, to recognize that every institution is different. There are different national contexts, institutional contexts, and so the scenarios they're quite broad and offer sufficient sort of flexibility to move within them. And I also don't think that they should be seen as sort of mere blueprints or strong structures. They're more a way of trying to start understanding how a virtual exchange can become part of curricula. There's sort of 4 thought lines and directions that you can take that into, allowing enough flexibility for your own institutional context to take into account. And as Marta said, there are some examples for each. There is some examples for each scenario that show the diversity within those scenarios as well.
Yes, thank you. And I believe on the website there are additional examples, practical examples, concrete, real life examples of virtual exchanges that have been integrated. Thank you. I have a question for Sarah about the internal stakeholders that should be targeted in terms of the toolkit, in terms of the strategic framework, perhaps also in terms of the training, so internal to higher education institutions.
Okay, I'll start with the training, as we were mainly involved with the training. And for us, the internal stakeholders of the training were both academic staff and administrative staff, of course. And we deemed it crucial for them to train them. And why, you may ask, out of all the training available out there. Well, I would summarize that these the training in particular, and then my colleagues can add something further on the other outputs. But we deemed it required for our internal stakeholders, I may say, for 4 reasons. First, because they could have a direct experience of what a virtual exchange looks like. And this is especially important for academic staff to see what their students experience while they are online for a virtual exchange, but also for administrative staff. Second, because you can have a full and direct idea of what virtual exchange is all about. I remember when I started working into the field of virtual exchange, one of the first questions we were posed, especially when COVID came about, was, well, okay, which technology, which tools? And our answer has always been, and through this training, internal stakeholders could truly experiment how virtual exchange is not about technology. Well, technology supports and is at the service of pedagogy. Third, I would say that this training in particular was especially relevant for internal stakeholders because they could mingle and intertwine with their colleagues from other sectors, other units, and this mixture and combination among various units, among administrative and academic staff, is really an added value. Because we tend, I say we because I used to work for a university for 10 years, and we tend within universities to work in sort of silos, and understanding that our needs are not the only ones, but there are other needs of other units, and that, administrative staff may have some requirements to respect, and academic staff may have other requirements and needs to satisfy, is extremely important. And then I would say that, especially and linking to what Marta was saying, the fact that in this training, we also incorporated and integrated the scenarios, the internal stakeholders could sort of find a pattern and sort of a path to follow. Out there, when you think, okay, I would like to start with a virtual exchange, what can I start with? And the scenarios could provide some input. And to conclude, and then I promise I'll stop. But also the fact that we provided several inputs and tools, including the worksheets, which were then fueled into the toolkit, the podcasts, which were both used in the training and also in the toolkit. We try to give concrete tools for staff, for internal stakeholders to work on, having clear in mind that we wanted them to achieve and have, in the end, an action plan. So this is the final outcome. And I think that some of the participants of our training, which I can see here, who I can see here in the audience, may perhaps confirm that later on. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, it would be interesting to hear also from the people who did the training, who are here, what your experience was and how you have managed to take forward your action plan or not, and what the challenges have been of pushing forward that action plan. Perhaps I will just move back to Casper and this time ask you what external stakeholders need to be involved as well.
Am I audible? Yeah. I think one of the things in the previous presentations and talks that we've heard today is the need to really incentivize institutions and academics to start working with and sustainably integrating virtual exchanges because a number of reasons, not the least the workload, but also the sort of recognition of the added value of virtual exchanges within teaching practices. And so the incentivization, I think, can come from external actors. I think Marcello also mentioned the idea of national agencies to really sort of incentivize institutions through the recognition and the social responsibility that was mentioned that institutions have to which virtual exchange can contribute. So more recognition by agencies and maybe national stakeholders of the value of virtual exchange could help universities to actually adopt and work for virtual exchanges. I think it's been mentioned before, but I think the European Commission obviously has a role to play. They have started to play a role within virtual exchange with the adoption of the funds for virtual exchange and the BIPs. But if I may be critical of that, I think it's a missed opportunity where virtual exchange is by the Commission really seen as a tool for exchange between Europe and external regions and limited external regions. So it's outside the EU, but then limiting to certain specific regions, not global. And it's not intra-EU. And if we then look at other dynamics that are at stake at the European educational arena, like the university alliances, for example, virtual exchange can be a great tool to use in those alliances. But with the current structure, strongly emphasizing virtual exchange of the EU and outside the EU, that doesn't really match. So European University Alliances would be a good external actor, I think, also to involve in the development of virtual exchanges. They're a great place, I think, where they could function and contribute. Yeah, and then maybe promote myself as a ready-made virtual exchange provider as an external party to higher education that could support and bring significant numbers and diversity.
So I have a question for Luca related to one thing that Francesca mentioned, which was obviously virtual exchange can be seen as a tool to enhance and support internationalization, but virtual exchange is much more than that. And so I'd like to ask you, in your opinion, how you think that virtual exchange and blended mobility can contribute to innovating and enhancing the quality of teaching within higher education. So in terms of teaching and learning. Yeah.
Well, of course, I just want to go back to the pragmatical approach. I think that what we learn in these recent and difficult times is that we have to keep learning, and we don't have to stop to a given model. This is, I think, the most evident limitation in this approach from the European Commission. And although I perfectly understand that it's not easy to govern a system, if we don't have a real educational area in Europe, we have too much variability because we had too much stress on these sort of formal targets. We have to learn by doing. But of course, we learned something already, and I think that let's say the best practices that we can already assess. We did it already this morning. I think we will have more information talking about specific experiences. Can bring us to define some parsimonious, let's say, target for the future, for the near future, combining what I call different but harmonized practices. We don't have to go too far in design to complicate projects for specific mobility, but we also have to be ambitious enough to put together different people, different disciplines, different levels of learners, different professional figures, and internal, external stakeholders. Harmonizing that by individuating, let's say, adequate partnership. In a way, we have to get for some kind of most similar institutions collaborating, people who know each other. I think that, let's say, path dependencies are important, similar university working with similar universities. And in this respect, the footnote on the alliance could be, although I've been always quite skeptical about this model of so many networks created and funded directly from the EC, from the European Union, can be probably something that can help the virtual exchange. And then what we learned in this first wave, let's say, of BIPs and programs based on virtual exchange, is that and this goes back to the point of the differentiated missions, we can make it better if we don't limit our performance to a specific aspect of our mission, teaching, producing good labs for research. We have to have a little bit larger thing. And above all, taking care of the community, of the people who are part of the community, particularly students, particularly international students who are the target of this process of learning. I call this thing which we experienced in this last 3 years, care sharing model. We'll learn how to, in very many different ways, to take care of a number of people we basically forgot. What I tell my friends in Siena is that we have forgotten about international students. After enrolling them and after getting all these Erasmus people in Siena, come to Siena, this is not, and then we tend to forget. We have to take care of them every day with different, and in this, the virtual exchange model is not only an instrument, but to some extent is a philosophy. I think we have to stress this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Luca, for that. I mean, it will be interesting in the next presentation when our colleagues from Siena tell us about their experience of the BIP, also to hear the student voices, which are very often not listened to and not heard. So integrating some of those student voices and why they think that the experience is valuable and in what way it has improved the quality of their education, I think would also be very important in terms of convincing those that need convincing to invest in virtual exchange. I'm aware of time passing, and I think I'd also like to open up the conversation. So there was a conversation that was interrupted by the coffee break, very nice coffee break. But perhaps we can go back to that conversation and maybe hear from the audience if you have any questions for the panelists or any comments, anything you want to add to what has been said from those. Okay, they are. Start with Francesca. And also from those who did the training and, any thoughts.
Yeah, sorry, I've had the floor too much. I just wanted to say when you just mentioned students, and I think when Casper was mentioning other stakeholders, I think involving students, student organizations as well in moving forward is really important because, yeah, they're the kind of the main beneficiaries too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Anybody
Ladies.
has any comments like or any questions about the project, about the outputs, about
Okay, I got to know the framework and then specifically all the working sheets last year in Valencia, the IFAC conference. And me and my colleagues from Utrecht were talking about this morning at breakfast. After all, we thought we have to work here. And then we went through it like, okay, it's a strategic framework. You start like, where does it link in the organization, blah, 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 blah. But in the same time, when I was working with it in Valencia, we realized although it's a strategic framework, it is very useful for the bottom-up working teacher. Because anyway, that is how it works with us. We help teachers, but there is an idea and that starts working and it starts becoming a project at a certain stage. So you work from the content, but even if you do so even if you start at a very operational level, there is a moment in your designing of your project that the framework will help you to realize like, okay, how will I get this sold to my boss? Because I'm going crazy. I'm doing this as my hobby and I love it, but actually I want to do it again next year, but I don't want because it costs too much time. So you need support. And so even if you start very bottom up, it's very useful to think about those levels. And when I got to know it in Valencia, I didn't realize that yet because I was there training myself and I'm there to support the teacher. So I was in this umbrella position. But actually it is very useful for any teacher if he wants support. And I think we should help the framework to do that and to tell that it works. It is strategic, but it's not for the strategic people. It's for you to help you.
Thank you, Jelly. Thanks.
If I may connect and relate to what Yeli has just said, because we meant it like that, so thank you. And I can report the experience we had during the training with one of the participants, a teacher, in one of the synchronous sessions, because every week, thanks to the collaboration with Sharing Perspective Foundation, we developed some worksheets, which then fueled into the action plan. So by the end, they had this whole picture. But every week, we asked them to focus on the institutional buy-in, on the detractors, on the championships, on everything. And I remember the frustration of this teacher saying, oh, well, how do I know about that? This is not my job. And our answer was, yes, we know that, but in order to implement successfully and smoothly virtual exchange, you need to start getting support, being supported, go out there, go to your institution, try to understand who is responsible for this, and that. Of course, we were not expecting any teacher or any administrative staff to be able to provide a wonderful worksheet with a strategy, with all the inputs. But the meaning behind was precisely the need for internal collaboration and not just collaboration with your partners to implement virtual exchange. And if I may only add, and this was behind the action plan, we worked in Valencia during the workshop, and the strategic framework goes a step further to provide some input also for the leadership, who is not maybe actively and directly involved in the daily practice, but who might need some input on what to consider to be able to incorporate virtual exchange at strategic level.
So in that sense, I think the relevance of the strategic framework for teachers and sort of staff level is it's sort of an end objective, and sort of an ideal scenario, because I think one of the things that I realized also when we had the consultation and when rereading the framework again and again, we ask a lot. Huh? If you implement the entire framework, you have to do a lot. And I think we all have to recognize that probably in none of the institutions, all these things will happen, but it is a sort of an ideal picture of which you can look at which is most feasible and suitable within my own institution to then integrate or work towards as a teacher in order to convince your leadership to get there.
Yes, thank you, Casper. Yes.
also adding that all these tools that the frames have developed, if you need, as a practitioner maybe, and you want people or staff with managerial roles at your university, it's giving you that opportunity to just show and be prepared when you want to communicate all this with them. So, because I think we've been talking about leadership and how important it is, and the role that staff with managerial roles, academically, for example, deans of the faculties or vice deans of internationalization, people that make decisions. So that's, suppose, yeah, approaching them what you were saying, Sarah, that's, yeah, I'm the one who's going to implement it, but how do I communicate? So that's the idea of all the different tools of the project.
I think I will give the microphone to Luca also for the last comment, because we need
Yeah, no, just to
so to hear here in Siena.
Yeah, well, to hear even a sort of little self-criticism, because I think this couple of last points were remind me about the thing we discussed with my colleagues here, the gap between what I call the evangelists and the rest. And although I like being in this fantastic group of evangelists, but I think we really need to, to fill this gap. And this is valid for our people who do a terrific job, but sometimes you feel to see them a little bit isolated from their from the context, and the same for the teachers, because you do not simply have the problem not to spread enough within you, and this is a problem of governance, basically. But you also have the feeling that sometimes you do something which is extremely close to something that is done in your department of pedagogy or psychology, and they don't know about these precious things we do with other universities having a European and global perspective. So it's a problem of governance, and I think it's a problem of internal communication, because what I said before, external communication is important for promoting, for for the international competition, but internal communication is crucial for getting out from the little group of evangelists. That's the point.
Thank you. And I wonder whether you're getting there here in Siena.
We try.
Taking steps. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much for taking part in this panel. And I will pass the floor to Francesca and, of course, the team.